I'm at home in Santa Barbara and a brief respite from the endless book tour.
How is the book tour going so far?
The worst part is over. That is the continuous travel. I love doing this with you. I love doing various interviews, being on TV, being on stage. All that is fun for me. What I hate is that big howling steel death trap they euphemistically call an airliner. That's what I really hate.
You are on a book tour right now for When the Killing's Done, and this is a story, fortunately, you don't really have to get on an airliner for to go to the Channel Islands, at least you don't. You can just hop on a boat, and that's because it's not far from Santa Barbara, where you are right now.
Yeah, you make it sound pretty easy, Max. Hop on a boat, but of course, what about the hour and a half of very choppy water to get out there?
That's true, that's true.
But it's better than an airplane any day of the week, absolutely.
Why did you want to write about the Channel Islands? Obviously, the story is more than that, but why the Channel Islands for this novel?
Well, because I was curious about them. I've been living in Santa Barbara for 18 years, staring out across the water. If the trees weren't in the way right now where I'm sitting, they've grown up. They didn't used to be so big, and it wasn't a little bit hazy. I could probably see out to them from where I'm sitting right now. So I really wondered what goes on out there. Now I know. And further, I mean, the whole story of the ecological restoration and so on, our interference with other animals and who has the right to do that and so on and so on, all of that plays into what I write about anyway, so it was a natural for me.
The thing that I found fascinating about your story is typically, from the broad sense, if you think of conservationists, environmentalists, the Park Service, and animal rights activists, you think, well, they're on the left side of the political spectrum. They're not at odds with one another. And they're certainly at odds with one another in your story. And I know that your story is based, at least in part, on true life events that happened out in the Channel Islands.
Yes, it is. All the facts of the story are true. And it all happened within the last decade. It was in 2001 when the Park Service bombed Anacapa with rat poison in order to remove the feral rats. How had they gotten there? During the wreck of the Winfield Scott paddle wheel steamer in 1853. But of course, they were, throughout all that period, they were killing off the ground nesting birds like Xanthus's murrelet and Cassin's auklet and various Brandt's cormorant and so on. And so, finally the Park Service decided that they could restore this ecosystem rather quickly and easily if they were to poison the rats. After, by the way, capturing the native white-footed deer mouse and breeding them up in their own facilities. And once the rats were gone, reestablishing them. And the rats are now gone. But of course, many people object to this. My two antagonists, one is Alma Boyd Dekasui, who is the woman in charge of all this for the Park Service. The other is Dave LaJoy, who decides that no animal should be killed for any reason whatsoever. The irony here is, as you point out, both of them are vegetarians. They both love animals. They both love nature. They both have the same kind of politics. They like the same music. They could have been allies, but they differ on one essential point. LaJoy is against any killing for any reason. Alma feels just the same way. However, she is a scientist, and she's practical about the fact that rats are everywhere, and these birds exist only on these islands.
Beyond nature and the idea of Mother Nature, this is certainly a story about mothers and daughters as well. Were you always intending for that mother-daughter relationship to play such a prominent role in this story?
It's totally autobiographical. I'm a mother myself, and I look fondly back on the years of breastfeeding. No, everything just evolves, Max. I don't know what a story will be. I absorb material and let it fly. And so the book begins with a very compelling sea adventure about this woman, 1946, who is in a wreck out there. Her husband and brother-in-law drowned before her eyes, and she clings to the rocks at Anacapa and is finally rescued 2 weeks later after finding a fisherman's shack and building a fire every night and so on. So this is what begins the book. I found the true story on which this is based very compelling. And once I had established this period, I realized that this would be the grandmother of Alma, who is, in her early 30s when this book opens, in 2001. So once that was established, it all seemed to fall into line. It's, I don't plan it out in a kind of mathematical way, things just evolve. And so, of course, at some point in telling the story of the opposition over Anacapa, I knew that the larger part of the book would go to Santa Cruz and deal with the killing of the feral species there. And then I realized that in setting that story up historically, I could tell the story of the sheep ranch. And it occurred to me that this would be the mother of Annis Reed, who is the inamorata of and ally of Dave LaJoy. And so that all kind of fell in place in a nice way that gives another thematic element to this book.
Mm-hmm. I think
but it's not pre-programmed. It's never pre-programmed. It's just organic. It just happens.
So let me talk to you about your organic creation, Dave LaJoy, who I think anyone that reads this book, Dave LaJoy is not easily going to be forgotten as a character. Do you know Dave LaJoy, or where did he come from, do you think?
No, I don't. He is purely an invention. I think both of the antagonists, of course, milk something that's in me. You know, there's a rational side and a very controlling side, and there's also the side of testosterone and rage. I relate to characters that I create, like the narrator of The Lie, or William Peck Wilson in Talk Talk, the identity thief. I understand this kind of character very well, and so in creating two antagonists, it seemed natural that Dave would be this sort of guy. Now, this is based on an actual story. There was an animal activist who went out to the island with vitamin K and threw it all over the island because this is the antidote to Rotofacum, the poison. I never met the guy. I don't know who he is. I only know from newspaper accounts. And so I've jammed up a story. I've created a story and a character based on this sort of person, and I've conflated him with another person who also went out and tried to stop the pig killing on Santa Cruz Island. You know, it got to a point where here I am right in the midst of all of this, and I have met many of the biologists now, and it was offered to me, for instance, to very generously to meet the guy who had been the head of the company who came to exterminate the pigs, and I was going to meet with him and talk with him to find out some of the details about that. And I realized that if I did, then I would have a picture of him in my head, and I might create a character like him. So the character I've created may be exactly like him, it may be nothing like him, but I don't really know. So it's a little touchy when, you know, you're right in the area where the actual people who participated in this are still around. So basically I'm getting it from histories, memoirs, and the news clippings of what actually happened. And it is true that on the refrigerator door, if only we could take this camera down there, I have the clipping from the news press from 6 years ago that says, "Eagles arrive as pigs are killed." This is a story about bringing in the removing the golden eagles, bringing in the bald eagles, and removing the feral pigs from Santa Cruz Island. Rats are one thing, and cute little pigs are another. And so there was tremendous controversy here, obviously.
I want to talk to you about how where you live now has contributed to you as a writer and the stories that you write, and also look back at where you grew up. You grew up in New York, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How did those two places, different coasts of the U.S., very different environments, how did each of those, if they have, do you feel like they've impacted you as a writer? They
have indeed, Max, and it's a good question. Because there you are in Massachusetts, and here I am in sunny Southern California, or Central California anyway. I came here accidentally because USC gave me a job. I'd never been west of the Hudson River till I was 21. I went all the way west to Iowa because I went to the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is where I also got my PhD. And then I could have gotten a job in several places as a professor. One that I really was keen on was Minneapolis, a place I visited on this tour where it was 1 degree, which I thought was a little stingy. Just one. Only 1 degree, Max. And I was reflecting with my wife on how different our lives would have been. I would have been totally assimilated there. I would have had a house on a lake probably, and instead of writing things like the Tortilla Curtain about illegal immigration from Mexico or this book about the islands, I would have probably been writing about the wolves up there and Swedish immigrants. Who knows? So it's quite amazing to be in a totally different place. A lot of my stories and novels have been inspired by being in California. I still feel a little bit like an outsider here, like a fish out of water. And by the way, I don't know about you as a teenager in Massachusetts in those dark woods and dark streets, but as a teenager, I spent a lot of time burning around in my mother's car at night, looking for my friends, or God forbid, a girl, which of course we never found. Meanwhile, the guys of my age whom I've met out here, who lived here and grew up here, they were out at the islands, in their boat, with their girlfriends. So it's a pretty different environment.
I saw on your website you have a great essay on writing, and in the essay you talk about the fact that you weren't always, and excuse me for paraphrasing, but you didn't always really consider yourself a writer.
I didn't see myself as a writer. It took me a while to figure it out. It sounds ridiculous that I came to it at such a late age of my early 20s, but look at my students today. They're born with creative writing. We didn't have it in school. I didn't know about it. I went to SUNY Potsdam, the state college at New York in Potsdam, which is the music school, to be a musician. That's what I wanted to do. I flunked my audition. I had to declare a major, so I declared history. And in the second year, we took an English course, and it was in the contemporary short story. I had to discover John Updike and Flannery O'Connor and others. And that lit me up, so I became a double major, history and English. In my junior year, I blundered into a creative writing classroom and found out what I could do. And subsequently, the next couple of years, I began to write some stories and to read and think about myself as a writer. And finally, I was lucky enough to get 2 publications. And that gave me the chutzpah to apply to Iowa, and luckily they accepted me, and I've never looked back.
For those folks out there who are like me, who are in amazement by how much good writing, not just writing, but good writing you are able to turn out, how do you do that?
Well, Max, it's my job. And I'm single-minded, and I've done nothing else all my life. I don't go to meetings. I don't play golf, I walk in the woods, clean up after my wife, and write. That's my life. It's something that's a compulsion, as in the essay you're referring to, This Monkey, My Back, in which I liken this making of art, and especially the discovery of what it is, to a kind of drug high, and you want to keep doing it over and over. And I very much like what you said. One reviewer whom I respect a great deal said just what you're saying, that he can't think of other writers who have produced as much of high quality. Now, I'm very proud of that. Yeah, I'm not throwing books out because I need money or I have to pay the orthodontist. I mean, I'm writing because that's my life.
Do you write on this computer that you're talking to me through right now?
No, I don't. If you can look in the window behind me, there's another room identical to this, and that's where I'm writing, on that computer over there. My work for today is already finished before you called.
All right, I'm going to let you go in just a moment. The Channel Islands, have you been there since you finished writing the book?
Yeah, I've been there several times, and we'll be there again soon.
Do you look at it differently? You talk about the view from your window. Do you look at it differently now that you've told this story?
Very much so. And in fact, I can reveal to you now that the book I'm working on now, which is 2/3 done, is set on one of the other Channel Islands. It's called San Miguel, the furthest one out. And I discovered this historical information while I was writing When the Killing's Done. And I'm trying something I've never done before. It's much more conventional than I've ever done. It's a straightforward historical novel about 2 incidents that happened on this island in 1888 and in the 1930s. And I just want to see what it is and whether I can do that. And after the 3 weeks continuous of the tour, I'm just clearing the basis, that I'm rereading the first 2/3 and getting a feel for it, so that I hope to be able to finish that sometime over the summer or into the early fall, and then move on to more new short stories.
T.C. Boyle, it's truly been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for taking the time, especially while on break from tour, to talk with me. I really do appreciate it.
Igualmente, Max, as we say out here.